meeting of the Goffstown River Advisory Committee. We have several people who are joining remotely through the Microsoft Teams platform. So any votes that we take will have to be a roll call. But let's start with introductions. Why don't we start with folks that are there in the room?
You can't be seen. Barbara, do you want?
Hi, excuse me, sorry. Hi, I'm Barbara.
Barbara Schultz,
Barbara Schultz.
community member.
Yes, yes.
Andrew Carteret, I am the Piscataqua River Local Advisory Committee member representation on this committee.
I'm Dick Bruno. I'm the representative from Economic Development.
Good afternoon or good evening. Josh Elliott. I am at large as an alternate. I do not own any waterfront property.
Hi, Dia Stolnitz. I am on the water, but that doesn't matter. I'm part of the committee.
And Derek Horntown, Administrator, serving as staff liaison this evening.
So we have one alternate, so the alternate will be appointed to participate in the voting, right, Derek?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
My time is
So
showing.
that's everybody that's present in room 106 at Town Hall. So now we have some folks that are participating remotely via the Microsoft Teams platform. I'll start with me. My name's Collis Adams. I'm the Select Board Representative on the committee. Who else do we have?
I think the other person, Collis, is Goffstown TV, so GTV, so they don't need to introduce themselves.
Okay. All righty. So we have some standard business we need to take care of. We just did the introductions. We've got a set of minutes from our last meeting. Let's see, let me get hold up there. We have an opportunity to review the minutes. And do they have any corrections, additions, adjustment to those minutes? Anyone?
I didn't see any.
I'd like to say that I thought it was a great meeting and I really enjoyed having Matt Carpenter here. I learned a lot about the Merrimack watershed and the Piscataqua, and I don't know how, it was good information.
Yeah.
I don't know if others
I
felt the
agree.
same.
I agree. No, a lot of information for somebody that's not very well informed about these things, but yeah, it was very good.
Derek, do we have like a standard certificate of appreciation or something we can send out to folks who participate, like Matt Carpenter in this case?
I'm sure I can put something together and have Catherine send it out.
Like a thank you or something.
Yeah, I can do that tomorrow.
We could,
Task her with
it would
that.
be nice if we could all sign it, if we had like an actual thank you note. Okay, never mind.
I thought it was a great presentation and I enjoyed it and I learned a lot. And I want to get down and check out those dams in Lawrence. It's what it made me want to see is what's happening down there really in the spring. And it gave me hope.
So let's get back to the minutes. Does anybody have any corrections to the minutes? If not, we'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
I'll make a motion. Accept them.
Go ahead. Second.
Okay, motion and a second to accept the minutes as presented. Let's see, we need a roll call. Why don't you take to the folks in the room first?
Okay, Barbara?
This is on the minutes?
Yes.
Yes.
Barbara? Yes.
Yes. Here, Dick.
Josh votes yes.
Dia, yes.
I vote yes. Andy Carteret? Collis?
Yes.
Okay, passes.
I just have a question. Does somebody have Matt Carpenter's contact information or is it easily available?
It's easily available on the state website, but
Oh, okay, all right. Because I had a question because I had worked at the Fishways and when I saw diadromous, I always refer to them as anadromous and I was just Googling like, whoa, what's, so I'm just curious as to the difference, or I could probably learn that by just Googling it at home, but.
I'll send you the link to the state personnel directory.
Okay. All right.
You can put somebody's name
right.
in there and find it pretty
Awesome.
easy.
Yeah, because I thought that would be a correction, but I just Googled it and it's not, so we're good.
But it is diadromous.
Yes.
All right, let's see, now I get the minutes, the agenda pulled back up. The next, we always start off next with some good news. If there's any good news to share, we call it honors and accolades. Does anybody have something good news other than the great job that Matt Carpenter did? We'll make sure we recognize him for his good efforts. It was a tremendous presentation. But does anybody else have any good information they want to share with the committee? Now would be the time.
I'm seeing
Seeing none.
no comments here.
Okay. Has Michael showed up yet? Or-
He has not. He has not.
Okay.
I resent him the invitation, but
Okay.
I'm not seeing him there.
Well, let's jump down the agenda then. Is there any old business to come before the committee?
Carlos, I'll say, you had public comment on here. I don't know, there's nobody here, but if you.
Got too many screens in front of me.
So,
Yeah, is there anybody there for public comment?
there is none.
No.
Nobody.
Public comment. Let's see, so we'll jump down, just keep moving, so when Michael gets there, he can take it away with his presentation. Any other old business or new business?
So, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was, as I had mentioned to Carlos, and Derek, maybe you can help me out, because this gets into like old business of planning who our next speakers are. But with Carlos not running, how does the select board work with regards to appointing somebody else? And, should we skip the March meeting? Because town vote is like the week before.
It's March 11th.
Yeah.
There's a recount period until Friday of that week. And the select board will have their formation meeting on March 17th. And typically for the first week, they'll choose a chair at that meeting, but they will not assign committees. So there won't be necessarily somebody assigned to this committee yet as the select board member. So they might just send somebody, if you do have a meeting on the 19th, they would just ask who's available to participate in that, and they would participate. And then they would decide who's gonna man this committee for the year.
And when is that usually decided? Like, is it?
The 24th, like, just
The next
the next meeting.
So, I mean, I would like to not meet if we don't have select board representation. We're not under any fire to do it, and, it'd be nice if, like, the person who was assigned, like, was brought up to speed on the committee, what we're doing and what we're working on. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that?
No, that was one of my thoughts. I thought you should probably wait it out. I would agree with that. Just wait until the new person has been assigned to the committee. So,
And my thought is also because we're having guest speakers, and
Yeah.
it's more impactful if the people who are involved hear these guest speakers. If we have someone from the Namaski Lake Association next, or from Exeter or Wyndham, I would want the select board rep who's
yeah.
really our liaison to be at the meeting.
Is there anything that we,
Derek, I have a question for you. I would really like to continue to participate on this committee. I think my experience and expertise lends itself to providing service to this committee. So how would that happen? I assume maybe I have to drop off and then be appointed as a member at large, or what's the process?
So the select board would have to amend the charter, because right now all the positions are currently filled. They could add potentially an alternate member and appoint you into that position.
Okay.
And I
I want to
can,
throw that out. Let you know I'd be happy to continue my service.
I can bring that request to the new board once they're seated in March.
Perfect.
We can
I
make,
think that would be great. If we could.
what do they do usually? It's like an honorary member or something like that will bring you, it is the,
Emeritus.
emeritus.
so getting back to having a March meeting or not, is there something that we could work on that you know, I understand the guest speaker importance for the new select person to hear and be present for, but is there anything else we could be working on that wouldn't, you know, have that impact? Are there other things we should be doing? So I'm just throwing that out there. If there's something else that we could work on in March, but if not, that's fine.
We're not charged with any real public outreach at this point.
Okay.
And I think we're waiting for, you know, until DES receives funding. And as we just heard Josh saying, you know, that's up in the air, those grant applications.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not aware of anything else. I mean, there hasn't been any news on the dams, Derek, that you've
So
heard?
the Department of Environmental Services did request a letter of support from the select board.
Yeah,
We did that at our January, either 10th or 17th meeting, I don't recall which, or whatever dates they were. They were submitting a new grant application to NOAA for the removal of fish barriers. It's the same grant application they submitted in the fall of 2023, and they were, but they did modify the grant application a little bit. They're really just focusing on a fish ladder at Namaski, at Kelly Falls Dam, and then a truck and trap, where they would truck and trap them there and bring them above Greg Falls. So they, as far as I knew, they were submitting for that grant application. Like I said, we provided them a revised letter of support for that grant application. They were submitting that at the end of January.
right. And
So they would truck them around and dump them into Glen Lake?
Potentially even higher as well. I'm not certain if it would just be Glen Lake or if it's, I know they want to get it, I would say as long as Hadley Falls is still there, they would probably dump a portion above it as well.
Yeah.
But I did not see the specifics of the grant application.
the PRLAC, you know, sent a letter of support also for that. But in my understanding is it was scaled down, you know,
Right.
so instead of the whole, they were just looking for a piece and hoping that that funding would be a little bit more reasonable. But that's, you know, the application, as Derek said, was
Yeah.
at the end of January, but when funding will be awarded is up there.
Is there any benefit to us reaching out to our congressional people to let them know the grant is there and, you know?
Sure, I would think. Would it be as a citizen, though, I would think, right? No, if we were to reach out to our federal delegation about the application on behalf of DES, we would have to be reaching out as a citizen, not
Or
on
you would
behalf of
need
this
to bring
committee.
that recommendation to the select board and
Yeah.
ask that they do that. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
because we are
Okay.
Yeah.
kind of like a committee of the select board. And so,
So do we want to do that, or is it just, we don't think they would?
well, they sent a letter
Oh,
of
okay,
support
okay.
for it.
So we wouldn't be duplicated?
But certainly constituents reaching out to them and saying, hey, this is important to me, I live in Goffstown, would be a good thing.
Okay.
Absolutely.
But I think
Okay.
I've invited Michael into the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, I see it.
So do we want to just finish this? Do we want to move the meeting or keep it for?
I think so, because the other piece of business was the website, and we already talked about that being holding up in any development after
Yeah.
after elections, when things get a little bit more settled. So,
Good evening, Michael. Good evening.
Hello, Michael. Okay. Well,
and so I see no reason why we
Dia, your thoughts on
Should
next?
meet.
Do we meet next in March or do we hold over to April?
I think we meet,
Meet?
yes.
Okay, Josh, your thoughts?
I'm kind of inclined to wait until the select board appoints somebody because we are a creature of the select board and
Right.
we should make sure that that person is here to be able to hear everything. I
Oh,
think.
I thought March 11th that would have been determined. No, so by March 19th, it's not determined.
They
No.
would, they may have somebody attend the meeting, but it may not be the same person that's appointed for the entire 2025.
Okay, then I agree. Let's wait till we have our person, our select board.
Okay, and then I can even
Representative.
reach out to them and maybe give them some, or
Yes.
call us, Ken, to bring them up to speed on what we're doing, and, because it may be somebody who's already on the select board, it may be somebody who's not on the select board, not aware of any of this.
Right.
Okay,
Oh, okay. we did.
all right, okay.
So I see we have our guest speaker has joined us, so. Why don't we move along so we can get him out of here at a reasonable hour and he can get back to his family or whatever else he's got going tonight. We're really fortunate to have Michael Hildenbrandt with us. Michael, I'm not going to go into too much. Do you need some background on our committee and how we're established and what we do? Or have you had some background information fed to you already?
I have very little background. I mean,
Okay.
I got an understanding that you were created to, kind of oversee or evaluate the water bodies, whether it's the ones for these particular 3 dams or for the whole town. But that's kind of the depth of what I know at this point.
Okay, let me give you just a brief history on the committee. We're a committee that was established by the select board. We're called the River Advisory Committee, looking at issues that are important to us that it had to do with the Piscataquag River that runs through the center of town. That's kind of a general overarching what we're doing. It may be everything from right now, it's focusing on dams because DES is in the process of removing a dam at Hadley Falls, which is the dam that's right in the center of Goffstown. If you're familiar with that or not, I don't know, Michael. If you've ever been to Pumpkin Regatta Weekend, that's the dam that forms that little impoundment. But then there's also the Kelly Falls Dam, which is down near the Manchester line. And then the third one is the Greg Falls, which is the big one in the center of town that forms the water body known as Glen Lake. So that's kind of the area we're looking at. And it's kind of a wide ranging topic of things that we're going to talk about. We've already heard from DES, Corey Clark at DES, who oversees, who's the chief engineer up there. He did a great presentation on the dams and the histories of the dam. Last meeting, we had a guest speaker who was Mike,
Matt
Oh, yeah.
Carpenter.
Matt Carpenter from Fish and Game, because we wanted to know a little bit about the biology of the river. As we had first the engineering aspects of the river, then the biology aspects of the river with Matt Carpenter, and he did a great presentation as well. So now we wanted to take another step and talk with somebody who's been involved with the engineering side of this, constructing dams, removing dams. We know there's one, I think, in the process. I think you're with Dubois and King, and I think aren't you doing the Hookset dam removal?
I am. I'm the construction manager on that project for us.
Okay. Well, I don't want to go too much deeper into this, Michael. Why don't you introduce yourself and can explain to the committee, what you do, what projects you're working on, and how you might be of assistance and service to this committee.
Sure. Okay. Michael Hildebrand, as he said, I'm the senior project manager. I'm also the dams group lead for Dubois and King. I've been with the firm since 2016. I was the director of environmental services for a little while. I left the firm for a few months to explore some other options, and then came back. So essentially been with the firm since 2016. I have experience in rivers, lakes, streams, etc., but also in dams. I've done studies and some engineering on dam removals. The firm has done several dam removals in the last 5 years on the associated with the Connecticut River Council within their watershed. But also we do dam rehabilitation and dam replacement. Kind of those two terms go hand in hand, but some people treat them a little differently. And we, just this past year, we're working on Hooksett. We also worked on restoration of a historic dam where we installed a dam immediately upstream, so that way the historic dam would still look the same, but it would no longer have to do the performance to meet the state requirements. We also replaced and rehabilitated 2 dams down in Swansea this year, one in Keene, so one for the Keene School District and one for Swansea. That was the Upper Wilson Dam. We do dams of many different sizes, from minimal hazard, under that 500,000 threshold, all the way up to high hazard. We're currently working on the design for 5 flood control dams for NRCS throughout the Northeast. We were selected for their Region 1, and now they're Region 2. So we work on dams at all levels and for all sorts of different reasons. We also do a lot of hydro work. Our structural folks work on many different hydro type facilities. And then our dam groups work with them in their rehabilitation. So if there's water, we probably worked on it. We get to sit in all sorts of different public meetings because people are extremely passionate about, the things that are near and dear to them. A lot of times that's a recreation more than a hydro facility. People don't have as much concern for that, but they do like, hey, that's my boat launch. What do you mean that dam's going away? Things like that. So I've got to stand there and spend late hours on a public committee, helping people understand, this is why, this is what it's going to look like afterwards, and hopefully we come to a resolution or an understanding that helps them move forward with projects.
So Michael, the Hooksett Dam removal, I think, is kind of near and dear to us because of its close proximity to Goffstown. And some of the committee members had thought, gee, that would be kind of cool to go out and see what's going on. We don't want to get in the way, certainly, but, can you fill us in on what's the latest and greatest with Hooksett?
Sure. So that is a fishway. It's a series of weirs that allow certain flows to pass through and a fish to move from the downstream to the upstream, because obviously the whole other side of the river is, a steep drop off and the hydro facility. So there is a company that's working on AOP passage turbines, but that's proprietary to them. They're not really sharing that with folks. So these Patriot Hydro went ahead and they're putting in this fish, not a fish ladder, a fish way system. It's a little gentler than a fish ladder, a lot less jumping going on.
Yeah.
So right now they're in the middle of construction. They're trying to get certain things done before spring high flows. And so far the project's going well. Obviously there's some, weather delays with how Mother Nature's been treating us lately.
What's the schedule look like for that, Michael? When do you expect it to be wrapped up?
A year and a half ago? No, just kidding. No, I mean the Merrimack all of 2023 or 23 had significant high flows. They were passing like 10,000 CFS, and so it just wasn't feasible. So they got started this year, late in the year, because the spring flows were high as well. So we're just working around what Mother Nature allows us to do, and they'd like to get the training walls and the bottom weirs taken care of, so that way they control water on the upside side and don't get the tailwater effect through the project. So there's a push to get the lower stuff done, which the bottom 2 weirs are done. They're just doing the finish work on those, and then hopefully get back in there after spring runoff as soon as possible. So I would expect that project to be done this summer if Mother Nature cooperates.
So maybe if we could keep lines of communications open, Michael, and like I say, there's been some interest of folks wanting to go down and take a look-see, what's this all look like when it's being worked on. Of course, we don't get in the way, and we understand high flows need to wait for those to subside. And I think I heard you say AOP, aquatic organism passage, is that?
Yeah, so that's just a general term for different species. There are design species for this project associated with the Merrimack. I use it generally because sometimes you have to consider salamanders and turtles and things like that. So more of a general term.
So what species are of interest in that project? I think, go ahead.
The salmon, obviously. FERC, which is if you're familiar with FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. They've been pushing for these hydro facilities to put in fish passage means for years, and these guys are, putting that in relation to that, and they're coordinating with NOAA and New Hampshire Fish and Game and others that have concern to make sure that this design meets what they need.
Michael, how would you like to handle this? Would you like to just sort of throw it open to the participants to throw out some questions or ask? How would you like to handle it?
Well, I wasn't sure what you wanted me to cover, so I think the Q&A would be great. But what I'd like to do is just show you a few pictures first of some dam removals we've done, some dam rehabs we've done, and then some aquatic organism passage things. I assume you've done your own research on these, but just maybe a little brief pictures and then Q&A.
Yeah, I think pictures are always great. Yeah. Is that okay with folks? Want to look at some pictures?
Yes, love to see.
We like pictures.
All righty.
I like pictures because if I put a bunch of words up on the screen, you spend time reading it, and then I gotta wait.
Yeah.
All right.
Michael, this is Andy Carteret. We had spoke earlier. What I'd be curious to hear is like timelines.
Yeah.
Like if a dam is being removed, and this is a small dam in the village, what's the timeline? Or with the fish passage on Kelly's Falls Dam, what is the timeline? Is that a year project or 5-year project? And kind of like just a big overview of those two different scenarios, because that's what we're looking at. A small dam being removed and a medium-sized dam having fish passage added to it.
I can discuss kind of a range of times because obviously it depends on costs and size of the contractor that you select. So after we go through the pictures, if you want me to stop and say like, okay, how long did that project take? Obviously, if something gets started in October and there are weather issues, it's going to take longer than others, but I can kind of give you the ballpark idea. Okay?
Thank you.
Sure.
All right. So let me share my screen here.
I can think the other thing is like on Namaski, like will the water be low for like a summer? People would hate that if they don't have access to their boats for a summer.
Have you seen my presentation?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. I'm starting partway in because, as I said, I don't want to give you all the wording. So, in looking at the different types of dams, either rehabilitation or removal, these are some rehabilitation projects that we worked on. Andy, I believe you were up at Curtis Pond.
Yep.
This is a late season. The principal spillway's been activated, so they're getting flows through there. We have a low level outlet down here in the bottom right, and then this one, because it's a historic dam, had to make the spillway look like the rest of the dam. So this is stone lined for there, so you can see it. Next year, they're going to lower the water level and color the dam similar to the stone, so this concrete blends in kind of to the background. This one, the construction of this started in mid to late July and finished December 4th.
That's
This,
about like a third of the size of the one in the village, probably. If that.
It's a third of the.
Yeah,
this is-
it's pretty tiny.
This is 125 feet across, and on the downstream side, it's about 8 feet high. To give you context, this is from stone to stone, it's about 10-foot wide spillway, 18 inches deep. This one over here is the one that was done down in Upper Wilson. This is a labyrinth weir where it shows if you just have a straight dam, you have let's say 40 feet of overflow length, but when you do something like this, it adds the overflow length and allows it to discharge more through that labyrinth weir than just a straight across dam. Then we have an armored channel downstream, and this dam it actually finished ahead of schedule. The contractor did a great job. The town did a great job as well. And so this finished, I want to say, in about 3 months as well. So about 12 weeks. These are a couple, this is a dam removal we did in Weston, Vermont. This is what it looked like afterwards. This is a very small dam. You can see it's not very high, but you're looking at kind of how they selected the channel to look afterwards. Kind of intermittent rocks, looks natural, restore with the dam removals, you're just restoring what was there previously. And sometimes they call it existing conditions when a lot of people feel like, no, the dam's the existing condition. It's been there for 60 years. But what happens is when a dam is breached, at least in Vermont, they say, no, the existing conditions is now no dam being there. So that's what we try to achieve. You kind of get a meandering stream channel as much as you can, and restore it back to what it was. So this project only took a couple of months. We had one over in Norwich, Vermont that took a little longer, and there's another one that we did the conceptual design on, and it's really the amount of material you're removing. Because if you go in and you're removing a laid stone dam, that could be pretty quick with an excavator. But if you're going in and removing concrete and you got to chip it and break it apart and get it out of there, that takes obviously more time. But then it's the amount of impoundment that you have to clean up. This other project was 9,000 cubic yards of sediment that had to be removed in order to get back to the original stream channel. That's how long and steep the impoundment was. And that ended up being, a 20-foot high concrete dam. So there was a significant amount of time associated with that one, because how do you get in and out of the stream channel with a dump truck at a time, or two jump trucks at a time, to get out 9,000 yards? So that one was projected at 6 months.
And what do they do with the sediment? You test it, right, to make sure it doesn't have PCBs or something in it?
Well, you test it ahead of time. So that 9,000 cubic yard one, there was composite soil samples taken up through the stream channel to check it ahead of time, because you got to get a handle on the cost. And if you're just taking that sediment and putting it somewhere versus having to treat it or get rid of it with a hazardous waste company, are two different costs, obviously. So yeah, sediments, there's soil samples taken, and then the soil is handled appropriately. That can be a town thing. You can sell it, you can use it. There's a lot of different options off of that. So the actual cost associated with that varies significantly. Some contractors, in their bid, they're not discharging it anywhere. They're taking it back to their own pits and using it for something else later. Because it's usually a very fine gravel and silt.
Michael, I have a question on Dick Bruno speaking. Do you go by do you have historical records when you take down a dam like this one that you're showing us, to bring it back to the state it is now? Do you look back at the historical records as to what the flow was at the time and what the direction was? Is that something that's in the equation, or probably not always available?
So there's two different options. There's a website called historicalaerials.com, and you'd be amazed that the federal government has aerial photos from 1898. In some sites. It's a pretty cool site to go to and kind of look at how one of your projects could have evolved over the years. The more rural, the less likely it goes back further, but I haven't found any sites that don't go back at least as far as 1965. I understand your dam predates that, but so then what you then do is look at soil investigation. So you dig down in the channel, you can see what the composition of the soils are in the channel and then what's below it. And as you go upstream, a really good geologist can say, no, this is fill, this is sediment. We're not down to the stream, the original channel yet. And you can also look at the height of the dam. If the dam's at elevation 1,000 and you look out and you can see the entire impoundment all the way out to elevation 1,000, and you look at the bottom of the dam and it's at elevation 990, you have a 10-foot change in elevation. You need to get back to that point, or further, depending on the sediment you're removing.
Okay.
That's generally a dam removal. And then on the aquatic organism passage, what we're putting in and hooks it, this is the left side that's done. I don't have a finished concrete of the other side, otherwise I'd show you the whole thing. But generally there's some low flow notches through the weirs on the other side that allow fish to swim upstream in low flow scenarios. Right here, they're putting in the rebar, the structural rebar for the weirs and the training walls. Keep the flows within this particular part of the channel. I was talking before about fish jumping on a fish ladder. This is obviously an extreme kind of cartoonish thing, but it's what NOAA shares on their website. So this is a much shorter distance. You're looking at something that fish, there's a design height for fish to jump. So as long as they know they can jump in that direction, they'll do it. And then, a more mechanical means where the fish are trapped and then, vacuumed out and then transported upstream. How often this happens, I don't know. I don't know if it's a continual thing or a seasonal thing during spawning or not, but I prefer the less maintenance, less observation solutions. And there are some cool fishways out there. I don't know if you've ever seen any pictures of them. Some of them can take up quite a distance depending on the design species. This one right here from the bottom to the top of the dam is probably about 150 feet.
What we heard was that, the targeted species would be alewife, river herring, and shad is what they were talking about. And eel, eel.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe we also had the design for the eel. I wasn't involved in the project at that point, but I think it was the salmon and the eel. Well, that's what I had, just to briefly show you. Is there anything
Michael,
I can
hi.
answer in those projects?
Yeah, hi, this is Dia Stolnitz. I know we didn't do full introductions, but we're all committed committee members here, and thank you for coming. So does your firm do the design from concept through implementation, through all the construction, or does it vary based on the project?
It varies, but we can do it all.
And how?
We're involved from inspections all the way through the end of construction and permit closeout. We do permitting, we do wetland investigations associated with the projects. We can do the whole thing.
Great. And how much, you mentioned in some cases, are you working with the town? How much are you working with what it looks like after a dam is removed?
Well, once we remove the dam and you get to that stabilization point, there's always a little bit of time where you have to go back and check it to make sure it's functioning as intended. And that's dependent on the town. Sometimes they have somebody who's qualified to check it out. Other times they ask us to do it. So it depends on the client's needs.
Thank you.
But what you were getting to, I think, Dia, was when does community input happen with, okay, so in one case, we've accepted this dam's going to be taken down, but we don't just want, rocks there that don't have interest, and, is there an opportunity for us to work with the engineer we saw one plan that had, like fish ladders or pools or, what other type of community accessibility can we build in? And is that driven by the community or generally whoever's hiring you is going to be driving that, I would assume?
Yeah. So the client drives that and the client solicits solicits feedback from, the people that they're affecting. There are certain things that you can and can't do. You try to match the existing stream bed that's immediately downstream, so you have a consistent working project all the way through. But there are some times where people ask for other things. In a dam removal, you may put in like a vein system. And so then you have a series of steps for the water instead of restoring back to the original channel. So a removal doesn't necessarily mean you're going back to a stream. It can mean other things as well.
And that would be led, then in this case, I think what you're saying is like, if DES gets to the point when they're removing that, they most likely will have community meetings where we as a community would have input on what is there after the dam's removed. That's a typical.
I would expect them to have probably 2 public meetings, one announcing the project and 2 after conceptual design. Because I don't think they want to get all the way to final design and then somebody throws a wrench in there like, hey, there's actually a sacred burial ground over there. You can't do that.
Michael, that takes me to the, in that design phase, you mentioned there's, you've built or rebuilt what were historic dams, so that I guess they wanted it to remain, to look similar. I'm not sure I'm getting that right, but we have something in town that obviously is center of town, and people are worried about what it's going to look like. So is that the situation where you would build something that looks like a dam that really isn't a dam? Is that kind of what we're talking about when you say preserving the historic nature of it?
So there's a couple of ways that can be achieved. It depends on how damaged or downgraded the condition of the dam is. If the dam is considered to be structurally unsafe, then you consider doing more and more of the removal of that. And because historic preservation is involved, you try to balance the 2 things. What did it look like before, and how do we get to a safe condition? And then that's a negotiation. If you have a laid stone dam like I showed you for Curtis Pond, you're not going to put a laid stone dam back in there because it's likely not going to meet the performance requirements of today's criteria. Our storms are more intense, they're longer lasting, and so on. So what we did in that situation is we just left the old dam there and built a whole new dam in front of it that was structurally separated, had all the hydraulic performance requirements, and then you saw the spillway and low level outlet that just went around that. To help in that situation, we also did a little reinforcement matting on top of the dam. So if this did overtop, the old dam wouldn't just wash away. It could. The new dam would function completely separate, but we're also trying to keep there what the community and historic preservation wanted. So in another situation, that may require, that dam is just not going to be able to withstand anything, and you have to remove more of it. But you could also put in a concrete dam and then put in a laid stone veneer on the front of it, as long as it doesn't cause a safety hazard. Now you have something that looks like it did before, but on the inside is totally different.
Okay, thank you. Interesting.
The dam that he's referring to was really, the community wanted to keep it.
Okay.
And it was, I think, privately owned, or it was unclear who owned it, and the town took over ownership of it, and they fundraised, and then they got some grant money, and then I think they put a bond out for the town to do it. And that was a small dam, and that was like $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
And along those lines, the original opinion of probable cost was $250,000 like 12 years ago, and it just kept going.
Oh yeah.
So,
Is there an overarching authority, for example, in all these discussions about the possibilities, does DES have the larger say, in determining the future?
Well, it depends. Can I just jump in here? It depends on who owns the dam. In the case of Hadley Falls, if you recall, DES owned the dam. And they said, we're not going to renew the license. We're surrendering the license. The dam's got to go, or it's got to be breached. It's got to be taken down. Something's got to be done because we, DES, the owners, are not going to renew the license. So what do you guys want to do about it?
But DES is also the one that ranks the dams for the high hazard, right? The degree of hazard?
I think if it doesn't have a FERC license, I think they do. Well, Michael might know better.
Yeah, so the hazard classification of the dam is a little bit different than whether FERC has over the authority or if NHDES does. In that scenario, you know, it's kind of like the fox watching the hen house. If it's their dam and they're determining what's going on, them relinquishing their FERC license doesn't necessarily mean the dam has to be removed if it's still structurally sound. It's just that they no longer want to deal with the energy producing side of it, which may be a prohibitive cost for them from what they're getting for energy. If it's still even used for that, if it's been shut down for a while and they don't want the license, then they just relinquish it and they don't have to adhere to the FERC stuff. But then that then kicks it into their program, or you know, absolutely does.
Yeah.
And then does it meet the requirements? Can they afford rehabilitating if it doesn't? Or there's always the does it meet the function that it was built for? And we're seeing that a lot all over where it was built for, you know, either mechanical or electrical power. It's not used for that anymore. And nobody needs the impoundment. It's not serving a need for the community for water supply or a recreational feature. And that, so that then, you know, you're kind of stepping through that and it's leaning more and more towards removals. That tends to upset.
It's definitely high hazard, right?
It is considered high hazard under New Hampshire's rating.
Yeah, okay.
And what's unique about Hadley is it's attached to a house, a mill that Dia lives in. You know, so it's not only a dam, but then I think the engineering would be, well, if you remove the dam, how do you structurally stabilize Dia's property that's there?
Yeah, that's unique. We did a dam rehabilitation in Fairleigh where there was a house on the dam. And they were trying to be two different owners. That was like Fairleigh, Vermont.
Vermont.
Oh. And did it all come out beautiful? Did those remain?
It was a unique challenge in structural engineering to get the dam to meet the hydraulic performance and support the house and keep everything. Because they had walkways over the dam and things like that. And that's, when you rehabilitate a dam, you know, dam safety programs don't want to really see something that may block the spillways. And in that particular dam, it was an overflowing dam, so they didn't really want, you know, stairways there.
There you go. Some ideas for the future.
So with dam removal, some of the standard things that we could expect with regards to like studies, you know, they would do like sediment, test the sediment. What other engineering type things are typical in a dam removal process? You know, there's a bridge that's right up above this dam that, you know, if this dam's removed, you know, how do they assess the structural soundness of that bridge and scouring? What happens there?
So that's kind of a division of responsibilities. If you're removing a dam, you're checking the soils because you have to get rid of those. But you also want to return the river to its, you know, a equilibrium, right? You don't want to create like this waterfall that's just going to head cut and cause problems all the time. At that point, those folks need to coordinate with the bridge folks and say, hey, we want to lower the stream channel 6 feet. And they say, well, our footings are only 3 feet. There's no way you can do it. You then have to consider some other things like that vein option that I talked about. Instead of just going to a stream channel, now you got to maintain a water elevation there and then step down after that to get to the natural stream channel. An example of that is in Randolph, Vermont. They removed this short little dam, which is only like 3 foot high, but the Main Street Bridge was 50 feet upstream of it. So they put in these veins in order to maintain certain water elevations as they went by those piers.
Because the footings of the bridge weren't deep enough, is what you're saying, to get to the stream bed.
I'm not 100% sure on the actual design reason, but that is what the end product was for that situation.
And then I'm an upstream landowner, so what would we expect being a landowner upstream if they removed the dam? How would that impact us? Is there anything we need to be aware of as a?
So more than likely, the floodplain elevation is going to drop upstream of the dam. May transfer downstream. There may, you may get this balance of it dropped upstream of the dam, but it may raise a little bit downstream because now you're just, there's no more attenuation of the flows. So it'll get downstream quicker. But upstream of the dam, you should see a lower stream elevation, especially within the impoundment. So if you went, if you had your impoundment that was, this triangle shape and you're here and it drops to here, obviously that 10-foot drop should drop the flood elevation, at least at that location, linear speaking 10 feet. But up here at the top of it, you may see just a slight modification. It depends on how much the dam was attenuating before. If it had some freeboard because there's, multiple spillways that allowed water to flow through in low flow situations. So you'd see a little retainment and then return back to, normal operating.
And then with the dam that they're looking at putting in a fishway, what would the property owners on that impoundment expect during that time? They're concerned about the water being too low for boating and doing activities on it. So is that like a whole summer that could impact them, or it wouldn't impact them at all? You can do the whole thing at low flow and you don't have to drain the lake any further?
That gets into control of water, which is one of the most expensive parts of dam work, because renting a pump can be $1,000 a day depending on the size of the pump you need. So that can add to a project significantly. So if they're able to construct the fish passage and not disrupt the flow, then you would see nothing different on the upstream side. It would operate as the weather allowed it to operate at that time.
Is that typical or?
No. There's usually in an older dam, there's usually only one spillway, and if you're putting the fish passage associated with that spillway, then you have to stop the flows through that area.
Yeah.
Depending on how they do it, if they put in a cofferdam upstream, like for Curtis Pond, we put in a 14 or 8-foot high cofferdam, and the water on the upstream side was pumped around the project, and the upstream water elevation didn't change.
Yeah, that's probably what they would do.
Okay.
So, Michael, thank you. This has been really helpful. Do you think there's anybody else this committee should reach out to just to learn more? So you have been our second guest, wonderfully. We had Matt Carpenter from Fish and Game. Do you have any recommendations so we can continue to learn what it will all mean?
Well, you talk to the DES about the history of it, and obviously have an idea of what they're doing for the work. With the Fish and Game, you talked about probably how it's going to affect wildlife in the area, fish passage, and so on. Really, when we've talked about kind of the engineering side of it, I think you've hit the trifecta. Of what's going to be done. Maybe actually, you know what? If you talk to historic preservation, if they're going to be, if you have a concern about this dam in your downtown, you might want to talk to somebody who's going to say, yeah, they can't do this, they can do that, and give you an idea, at least as far as that's concerned, of what they're going to be able to do. And they may have an opinion.
We did invite somebody before we were an official committee. We did have somebody come from New Hampshire Preservation and just look at the dam and actually verify that it was historical.
Yeah, I think the challenge there was funding. There's no funding to keep a dam under historic preservation that we were aware of.
Yeah, there's certainly more funding around for removals. because you get the friends of this river or that river, and they raise money through national organizations sometimes. So we found that there's a lot more funding available on the removal side.
So I think one of our next guest speakers, we're going to be like towns. We're going to line up some towns that have gone through this. And do you have any recommendations on towns that would be similar in size and issue? A dam removal and a fish ladder on a different dam?
Not necessarily a town, but if you talk to Connecticut River Council, they're obviously doing a lot of dam removals along the Connecticut River watershed. It used to be Ron Rose over there. I can get you the name of his replacement there. And then on the rehabilitation side, obviously, the Curtis Pond folks, Swansea, we've done a few dam projects over there. I can put you in contact with the folks at Patriot Hydro if you want to talk to them a little bit about their fish passage. Brandon Barker is the project manager for them. I can give you his information so he can just talk to you in general about that project and the coordination with the different agencies.
And are they the Hooksett Dam? Is that who's doing?
That's Hooksett, yeah.
Okay.
Where's Curtis Pond?
It's in north of Montpelier, Vermont. Yeah. Collis, did you want to wrap it up? I think we're good here. We're getting to
Yeah, I
time.
think we're good. Michael, we want to thank you very much for spending some time with us. Hope we didn't cut into your evening too much, but some great information helps us build our knowledge base and help us think about where we're going to go to next. And you've also given us some good insights as to what we might want to take up next and who we might want to connect with next. But wanted to thank you very, very much for spending the time with us this evening. This has been very helpful. Certainly appreciate it. Is there anything else we can do for you?
No, I appreciate talking about the work we do. So I like
Good.
the opportunity to talk with all of you, and
Yeah.
hopefully I provided you good information. And I wish you guys the best of luck in reaching out to your community and getting everybody on board.
And can we use you as point of contact, Michael, for Hooksett? We, once the flows subside a bit and say, is it a good time for us to come out and sort of poke around and be sidewalk superintendents for a day?
Yeah, I meant to answer that question before. So when you go to Hooksett, you can't enter the project without certain PPE. And there's a railroad flagger there, so you got to check in with him. But that aside, if you're up on the road, you can see the whole project pretty well just from standing up on that little side road.
Oh, okay.
If you wanted to go into it, I can coordinate. The winter isn't the best time because the access road down in there is barely suitable for an excavator. Just because of the winter conditions. So they keep equipment from moving back and forth down the access road. So getting down into it probably not preferable. And if you can't get down into it, it's probably easier just to see it from up on the road.
Yeah. We certainly don't want to interfere with anything or put anybody at risk. All right. Any other questions before we wrap up with Michael this evening? Again, thank you very much, Michael. And have a
Thank
good
you very much.
Thank you.
Michael.
Problem.
Have a
Thank
good
you, everyone.
night.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Okay, where do we want to go from here, folks?
I just have a question. I want to make sure that I'm clear. So the Hadley Falls is high hazard and it's been determined it needs to be removed.
Yes.
Okay. With the federal situation and then the state situation, which is also on, I wouldn't call it austerity, but, Governor Ayotte is encouraging cutting back and all that kind of stuff. What if there's no money to do it? Then what happens? If it's at risk, but there's no money to do the work that needs to be done?
So I think
Is that a possibility?
So I think high hazard, and folks can correct me if I'm wrong, high hazard is a designation that if the dam were to fail, what kind of property damage would ensue. That doesn't necessarily say that this is a dam that's in danger of failing. It says if it fails,
Yeah.
a lot of bad things will happen. Not necessarily that the condition of the dam is poor.
Right.
Oh, okay,
I would agree
okay,
with
okay,
that.
okay. Oh, that helps.
But I
Okay.
did, I did call.
One thing that plays a major role in classifying as high hazard is if the dam were to fail, would there be loss of life? And of course, because of your property right there, Dia, that's the case, which is why that is classified as high hazard.
Right. But I did ask that exact question, Barbara,
Okay.
to Corey Clark. And I said, okay, it was high hazard. You tried for a grant, didn't get the grant, so there's no money, so is it still high hazard? You know, so what's the status? And, I think everybody has answered it here, but when Matt was here, he also said Hadley wasn't a top priority. He said there were a number of other dams that the state was going to look at before they looked at Hadley Falls. There was a number of other dams more at risk that
Okay,
needed help.
okay.
Didn't he say there were like 10 or 15?
Yeah, I do
Like,
remember referring that there were others.
there were definitely others.
So I think it would sit there until they had funding to do something about it.
Yeah.
Is
Got
really what's
it,
going to
got it,
happen.
okay, okay.
Yeah.
That
I mean,
helps.
it's
Thank
been
you.
there, not being generating electricity since,
2007.
yeah.
Yeah.
you
Okay,
know,
yeah, okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So Derek, can we ask you to send a thank you as
Yes.
well?
Yep.
Because I think it is really nice for these people to take their
Yeah,
time on
yeah,
an
that was
evening.
good. That was helpful.
So if we don't meet on, in March, who are we thinking of inviting in April?
So I would like to propose, I'd like to get the Nemaski Lake Association here.
Get the what?
Nemaski
Yeah.
Lake
Yeah.
Association. So I would like to connect with our two representatives, Paul and Christopher, and see if we can get them here. And if we can't, I will work to get towns here, the town of Exeter and potentially the town of Wyndham. Exeter is an example of where they removed the dam, and then Wyndham is where they saved the dam.
They
So-
actually formed a nonprofit and raised a ton of money.
Hmm.
It was a private dam though, so that's a little different. But it's.
Or I can
still-
reach
it's-
out to
it's-
Swansea
It's still
or-
a good story though, I
Sure.
think, worth hearing.
I think hearing from Exeter will, it might be two different meetings really, because I think Exeter's probably got a lot to share with
Yeah, I
us
would think
about
that's
their
pretty
whole
extensive.
experience.
Yeah.
So can we keep the exact speaker open until we get closer
Yeah.
to the date?
So do you want to, are we selecting the next date for April?
We had it, that's what I
Did
was
we?
looking at.
Yeah.
Where
The
is it?
April 16th,
April
16th?
16th?
yes.
Okay. So,
And then what, Derek, whenever they appoint someone, I am more than happy to take an hour and kind of go over the committee or bring that person up to speed if
Okay.
needed.
Great.
One thing that Michael had mentioned sort of triggered something in my mind in terms of, talking about that bridge there. I'm assuming that's a town-owned bridge, right? The state doesn't own the bridge that's
Correct.
right here that way.
The town owns it?
The Main Street Bridge, yes.
Oh.
Might be worth, that's probably more of an internal conversation within the town of, okay, what does the structure look like of that, where the footings are, right? Is that something else we need to be considering, is that when we get to that point of removing that dam, that will limit those options of what that sort of looks like underneath if we need to do a bunch of shoring up there, does the water level need to be there? The other thing that sort of triggered my, a thought of talking to the water department, because I'm assuming that their well, I know it's up here on 114.
They have the reservoir
Okay,
on the mountain, but they switch over to the wells at some point in the summer.
okay,
So
okay.
they switch back and forth, yeah,
Oh, they
that's.
do blending, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because that would be the other question I would have of, okay, if that dam, Hadley Falls is removed, does that impact where the
water table.
how much water they can pull out of those wells during the summer? And it might be oh yeah, we're fine, we go way far down anyway, and that's not gonna make a difference, but if it makes a difference, we should probably know about that up front.
And then there was, at one point, Josh, the fire department actually had weighed in because they use that water there.
Oh, okay, yeah.
If there's an emergency and they need to pull water from the town. And so there was even talk about maybe, can it be engineered so that the dam isn't, completely gone, but you still have an impoundment of 3 feet? Something that they can stick their
Yeah,
fire
you can get
hoses
it, yeah.
into. So those are unknowns. All of
Right,
that is
right.
unknowns. It comes down to funding, I think.
So when it comes time to actually do this, DES does a whole engineering study and pulls into all these things about the footing of the bridge and the wells and all that other kind of stuff? That's their responsibility?
And we should ask questions to make sure they do it, I
Right,
think,
okay,
is,
okay.
did you check with the water precinct? That's,
Okay.
I have no idea,
Yeah.
Okay.
if that would impact them. And they may or may not know that the water precinct is, half a mile upstream.
So different sides of DES might know that, right? The water division would know exactly how far that is. A regulated water system, they would know exactly. But if they're talking to the dam people, right, they may not necessarily think of that.
Yeah.
I think that's why we exist, to ask those questions and bring it all together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Eric, will you be the one who tells the committee members who are here today that we're not meeting in March?
Yes.
Thank you. So Andy, then you are going to think about April, yes?
Yep.
Talk to Paul and,
I want to talk to Paul first and work with whoever they can get. I want to work with that schedule.
okay.
The letter that the town signed to support the fish passage, that also went to the residents of Namaski, and there was some confusion over whether they should sign it or not. And so I think it would be good for us to make a relationship, a better relationship with them as things move on. So that
Okay.
would be a priority.
Okay.
People were unclear of why.
I agree, I think that should be. Priority, we need to join forces with them,
Yes.
for sure.
So that they ask us or attend the meetings as opposed to going to Facebook or other sources for information. I mean, we're here to give them information and to be a conduit.
Yeah, we want to make sure we're kind of moving in the same direction as they are so that we're not contradicting one another and people aren't getting mixed messages about who's doing what where. So, yeah, I think establishing good working relationship with them and making sure we've got good open communications with them is very important.
And we know that they have been active in any phase of this, the Lake Association, with regard to what's happening.
Well, they showed up at the meeting, certainly.
I know they were at the initial meeting that was held down at St. Anselm in 2023, and I recognize some members, or at least some waterfront property owners from, at our, was it September of last year, I think?
That's right.
Yeah, they were there. I don't know if any of the.
But they don't meet on a regular basis.
I don't know what their meeting schedule, they coordinate with DES, and they also get partial funding from the Conservation Commission in some of their efforts for milfoil treatment.
Right.
So we do have some contacts with them.
Okay. Well, no, yeah.
So that's sort of a learning experience then if the selectmen wrote the letter of support and then it got sent to the residents and caused discussion, we should learn from that as far as the next time something needs to go out. To maybe have I don't know.
Well, it was the letter of support was sent from the state to the residents, asking them to support it, which they did last time when they applied, but I think my guess is it was just such a short time frame.
Okay.
We got that letter of support on the PRLAC the day after our meeting had happened, and they needed it before the end of the month, so it didn't give you a lot of time.
Okay.
And I'm guessing on that, but.
Oh, it was a letter from the state, it wasn't a letter from the selectmen.
Right.
Got it, okay.
The state sent it to all these different organizations, said, would you
Got
please
it.
support
Okay.
this
Okay,
grant application? It's due at the end of January.
okay.
And, yes, so it's just, being on the same page with
Yeah,
them, I think is important.
And then also, if they had questions, like you just said, they know who to reach out and.
Right.
Be
and
right here,
ask.
they could
Yeah.
have listened to this,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
Or make them aware that it's all recorded and they can watch
Right,
it.
right.
Yeah.
You know, it would be nice, Derek, if you could ask Michael if he wants to share the slides to put on our web once it gets, you know, we said it would be a resource of information. I don't know if it would make sense without explanation, but it would show he was here and you had been a contact. And didn't Matt say he was going to send some information?
I don't remember.
I thought maybe he was. Anyway, I don't remember either. Okay.
We can check the video.
Yeah.
Well,
We can check the video.
Yeah,
yeah, oh,
The
yeah,
recording,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, we
I
can.
think out of context, it might be maybe
Hard to-
confusing
yeah.
for people.
You need to
just-
curate it, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Well, his slides made sense when he
No,
explained it.
yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
But to just put it out there for people
Maybe
to
hard.
see. And general
Okay.
public, they'll say,
Yeah.
what's going on? Is that what they're doing?
Yeah.
I can hear it now.
Oh, okay. But then, you know, we have a meeting in May and June. That would be good, one of
Yeah.
those times for a field trip to.
Sure.
You know what is actually an interesting place is to actually get to Kelly's Falls Dam, to see where they're proposing this. You know, when I was
Oh.
thinking of field trip, I mean,
Yeah.
that's a field
Yeah.
trip that, you know, you can get to this dam, right? We went to your house, dear, and you can see it, and you can get to Glen Lake, but you really can't get to Kelly's Falls Dam. You know, you drive over it and you can't see it.
Yeah.
And if you drive down around by where the ice rink is, you can get close to it, but it's all fenced off. And that would be an interesting field trip, because it's a lot bigger of a dam than I thought it was. Really.
Yeah, the rail trail kind of gives you a little access if you,
On the Goffstown side? Okay,
yeah.
yeah. So you can see it from that side.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and there's openings in the fencing and stuff. I don't know if they've been
Yeah,
sealed, but
Yeah. I don't think those are regular
no,
passageways.
no.
But if you drive down on where the ice rink is, you can kind of drive up and you can see where they're proposing this fish passage.
Oh, really?
The area.
From that angle, you can see it.
Yeah.
That would be neat.
Yeah.
Hey, folks, I'm gonna jump in here for a minute. It's 6:45
Yeah.
now.
Okay.
Candidates night's coming up at 7:00. If there's no other burning issues, I'd kind of like to wrap things up.
Yeah,
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
second,
Thanks, Andy.
No, second it, but I want to say thank you to Collis
Oh.
for
Yeah.
his participation, and I hope he does come back as the member of the general public. We need your expertise. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to continue. We'll see how that all plays out, but thanks for your kind words. So yeah, have a good evening, folks. You know, take care. You'll see me around town plenty. Don't worry about that.
Yes,
Very
Collis,
retirement from political life.
Collis, definitely come back and be part of us.
I'd be happy to. And Derek, thanks for putting this all together.
No problem.
Yeah,
Yes.
Thank you, Derek.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
All
we
in
had a-
favor of adjourning? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Good night.
Collis.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night, folks.
Thank you.